thanks very much, and thanks for putting this group together on such short notice. It's wonderful. And most of you know me, so I'm not going to spend, we have a lot of slides, and I think a picture is worth 1,000 words, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time myself. I'm going to get going on this thing, okay? What I did want to just mention there, that we still keep a website up, and the website, we try and keep it up to date, but since my daughter is now a veterinarian, she had her practice, you know, I don't get the full attention I used to get, even though I used to pay for everything. But anyway, it's still up to date. There's about 80 peer-reviewed papers on there. So it's a good place where you can go to get good, credible information, okay? So what I'm going to do is, if I can, if you bear with me, I'm going to try and do it fast, because I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I want to talk about anatomy and some biomechanics, and then we'll go in and we'll look at what we consider to be a good conformation for a horse's foot. Okay? Good. This is my progression over the last 50 years. If you look at time on the bottom of that scale there, and you see on the top there, on the left there, that's me when I started. That's 50 years ago. Okay, when I started learning the farrier trade, I knew everything. Okay? And this is me 50 years later on the right there. Believe me, it's complicated. There's a lot more to know. Okay, so when these guys get underneath the horse, put shoes on your horse, it's just not that simple when you get back and think about it. Okay. I qualified from honors to board in '81, and it's been a great ride, believe me. Okay, and I never had to take a back seat for my education. And I never once did I ever look back and say, geez, I wish I went to that school, or I wish I went to that school. I was completely satisfied with where I went and the education I got. And it sort of set the pathway. And absolutely wonderful. So the people that have come from under the book, be proud of it. I always start with two of my mentors, because these are two guys that I'm very passionate about. They're the ones that sort of set the stage as well. Everybody knows Professor Sabrond, and on the right there, that's Dr. Andy Parks. Both of these guys are in academia. Both of them are teachers. Both of them are surgeons. Neither one of them can shoe a horse, but they have a profound interest in the horse's foot. But the greatest thing about both of them is the way they approach the foot. They teach people around them, their students, mentors, everybody, how to think. And I kind of like this guy as well, Einstein, because education is not just learning what I'm going to present, but it's thinking about what I'm going to present and how you're going to apply it. We all, as veterinarians, we like to think about evidence-based practice. You know, facts versus theories, whatever. But the information in the literature on the application of farrier is really sparse. So what I try and use is anatomy. We know that hasn't changed in the last 5,000 years. Maybe gotten a little inferior with genetics, okay? Biomechanics is pretty factual. And then there are good basic principles that we can consider to be credible. This is a paper here that I published in 2005 with Derry Popard, who's a South African farrier, as you know. This has probably been one of the highest reference papers, you know, on things pertaining to the horse's feet. And it's really stood the test of time. And then I was just honored to be invited to do a chapter in the new Adams Lameness in Horses on the principles of farrier and shoeing. So there are some good, there's good information out there. Grant Moon is the farrier who most of you know. He's based in the UK. A wonderful farrier, a good thinker, okay? And this is one of his quotes, that it's very important for farriers and veterinarians to understand the science of farriery. Like with farriers, they have to have the craft or the skill to apply it to the horse's foot. This is another really great aspect of farrier. Underneath here, this is Dr. Andy Parks, and rather than you'll see a lot of slides that are beautiful. They come from the glass horse which Andy Parks created. So I'm going to give him credit on the first slide. So when you see all these other beautiful slides, I didn't make them, he did, so he's the one that's responsible. So form or anatomy, this is the structure of the parts and the way they're arranged. Sometimes I like to think about the equine digit as a mechanical system. If we look at that crane there, you have a strong supporting structure, you have movable parts at the top, and then you have a control tower. So we can sort of analogize that to the equine digit. So let's go through the lower limb here. And here we have the middle, the proximal and the distal phalanx. The proximal and middle phalanx, these are elliptical cylinders. They have a very strong cortex, they're rounded on the dorsal surface, and they form a flattening area in the back to accommodate your tendons and ligaments. Both of these bones, the proximal and middle, they articulate with the bone above and below. The distal phalanx is a little different. This is a real interesting bone because it does not have a cortex, it doesn't have a medullary cavity, and it's completely covered with soft tissue. So if we look at it a little further, we'll see it's unique where it has three surfaces, and it also has 3 borders. And the parietal surface here, whoops, what did I do there? There we go. I always hit the wrong buttons on these. The parietal surface here is especially interesting because it's roughened, so you can attach a modified periosteum to it, and it's also porous, so you can get vessels to come through. Okay. And because of the nature of the bone, as I said, it had no cortex, it had no medullary cavity, it's very prone to remodeling. And it's very susceptible to lack of protection. In other words, you have horses with very thin soles, or you have leverage where you have those long toes. Okay? And you can see how the margin, I'm sorry, I'll get this in a minute. Here we go. You can see how the margin here, you even got a marginal fracture there. You can see how that changes according to lack of protection or leverage. On the other hand, you think about overload. This is the horse with laminitis. You can see he's been standing on this section of the bone for a period of time. So the whole bone has remodeled according to that load. And you can see where it's flattening there, and you can see it's got the same concavity here in the dorsal surface to accommodate for it. Okay, here's that navicular bone, the one that causes all those problems. Okay, we're going to put it in the back here. It's going to go ahead and it's in the back part of the joint. It's going to make that a usable joint. But here you have a flexor surface, you have an articular surface, and you have 2 wings that you can see there. What's really interesting here is, look at this is the ventral border here, and then there's a smaller border on the dorsal surface. That's where your circulation goes in, okay? Think about that small area of circulation, and then 1,000 pounds on top of it, and this bone sitting in the sling. You'll see how susceptible it is to disease. So we can use that navicular bone to divide the foot into dorsal and palmar section, or palmar or plantar sections. Okay, I left my own slide mover in I think I left it in Cape Town somewhere, but you know, this is just a little awkward, so I'm trying to. I'm going to make these slides. I'm going to make this whole thing in a PDF. So don't worry about taking pictures, or you can if you want. But you know, we're going to go ahead. Okay. So quickly, the navicular bone, it increases the articular surface of the distal and the phalangeal joint. It maintains a constant angle of insertion with the deep digital flexor tendon. Coupled with the deep digital flexor tendon, makes the joint elastic, which I'll show you in a minute, which is one of your counteracting shock mechanisms for shock. But remember, it's a focal point of disease for where it sits, and especially the load it takes. I think this is especially interesting because if you look at the articular surface of the distal phalanx, this is your articular surface, okay, where it articulates with the middle phalanx. But you see that little flattened area where the arrow is, that's where the navicular bone articulates with the distal phalanx. Okay? So in my mind, I think I can show you where, if you look at your suspensor ligaments in the navicular bone and your impar ligament, the navicular bone is basically held in place by those ligaments. So I'd like you to think of the navicular bone and the distal phalanx moving as one against the middle phalanx. And we can further show that if we look at these radiographs. Here's a lateral radiograph. Here's a lateral radiograph that's flat on the ground. We take that same radiograph and we pick it up and we flex it. You'll see that the distal phalanx, or the navicular bone, moves very, very slightly compared to the proximal set point bone. Okay, so if you look at this, I apologize, I'm sorry, I'll get this in a minute. Keep my thumb there. If you look at that sort of ledge on the proximal plantar section of the middle phalanx, that is what's called the scutum, the proximal scutum. If you look at the navicular bone, you got a little layer of cartilage on the dorsal surface. That's going to be your distal scutum. So you say, well, you know, what's the big deal about a scutum? Okay, if we think about the proximal, okay, that is what keeps the constant angle of insertion on where the deep digital flexor tendon inserts on the distal phalanx. Okay, think about this with a horse with a low heel or a high heel. You know, this is where that all comes into play. Okay. If we look at the deep flexor tendons that come down, you see how it forms a wide expanse as it attaches to the coffin bone underneath there. Okay, there's your bursa, there's your navicular bone. So when the horse's foot lands on the ground, this joint moves in a distal palmar direction and it lands into this sling formed by the deep flexor tendon. So now think about the horse with a very low heel or no good structure behind there. You've lost your first shock absorbing mechanism of the horse's foot. Everybody follow that? Okay. I'm trying to make this so it fits into farriery for what farriers do on a daily basis, so they can think about what's happening inside and why you need these structures to sit. So here's a horse with a negative angle to the solar border of the coffin bone. You can see the change in the joint where it's moved distal in a distal palmar direction. But again, look at the deep flexor coming around and attaching. Look at the extra force that's placed on the bursa, that whole apparatus there. And the lower that heel is, okay, the lower that heel goes back, it's more pressure is put on that, or more force is put on that whole apparatus there. Okay, so we have our osseous structure, our bony structures. We have to complement them now with some soft tissue structures. And there we have the digital cushion, we have the ungual cartilages, we have the frog. Okay, if we look about think about the ungual cartilages or side bones, whatever you want to call it. Okay, these will basically form a extension of the distal phalanx within the hoof capsule. This actually gives you some stability in the back of your hoof. It gives you some architecture. These are sheets of hyaline cartilage. You'll see half of it within the foot. You'll see half of it above the foot, which you can go ahead and palpate. And if you look at it from behind, you'll see you've got these two axial projections on either side. And it's felt, we don't know, that these, when you have a good foot, these projections are situated right over the bars. So when the horse loads his foot, these are going to press on the bars. They're going to help a little bit with expansion. Okay, what do they do? What do we think they do? They assist in stabilizing the palmar foot. They aid with lateral expansion of the hoof capsule. It equalizes pressure within the hoof, and it's going to aid in decreasing concussion. Okay, the digital cushion. This is what gives you good foot conformation or poor foot conformation. This is what's going to form the bulk of the palmar or plantar soft tissue structures. Okay. And it's composed of fat cells, fibrous trabeculae, elastic cells, fibrocartilage tissue, okay? So what's the biggest significance about that? They're all slow dividing cells with a poor blood supply. So what we're thinking about here is protection. Let's maintain what we have, because when we lose it, it's gone. You know, there's no way this is going to start to restore. Here's what we would like to see in the ideal horse, okay? If we look at this is the deep flexor tendon at the top of the arrow. You're going through the digital cushion, you're going through the frog stay down to the horny frog. If you have a nice inch and a half of soft tissue there, that's to die for. You got a really nice foot. Okay? If we look at this and we put our thumb above the bones and heels, and we put our finger in the base of the frog. The closer your thumb and finger come together is the amount of mass you have in the back of that horse's foot. Okay? The closer they come together, the more you're losing mass. Okay, so the digital cushion is basically responsible for good foot conformation versus poor foot conformation. As you can see on the left, we consider that that horse was shy by me, so don't say anything bad about it. Okay, and the other one is a horse that has lost a lot of digital cushion, and you can see the difference in the conformation of the horse's foot. We need ligaments to stabilize those joints. And like I said, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. We need to stabilize joints. They add a little protection. They actually guide the joints in motion when they're going in whatever direction they are. The ones that are the biggest concern to us with farriery are the collateral ligaments to the at the distal interphalangeal joint and the suspensory ligaments there to the navicular bone, and obviously the in-part ligament. Okay. The tendons, the extensor tendon, the deep flexor tendon, and again you can see here the deep flexor tendon forms this wide expanse underneath the horse's foot. This is what the whole support mechanism in the back of the horse's foot. This is what holds it up. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and watch myself or watch Roy cut the deep flexor tendon until it goes like this. Okay, so it's going to give you some proof there. There we go. Okay. Annular ligaments, in any kind of a situation where you have, different pulleys or levers, you need to keep these in focus, and these annular ligaments are going to keep your tendons in focus. They're also going to give you some nice protection. What's this all about? It's all about a healthy, functional foot. And if you want to have a horse that's going, no matter what your discipline is, at the top of his game, he has to have a good foot. It's as simple as that. And there's nobody that's more responsible for this than the farriers, to keep these feet healthy. Okay, so why a healthy foot? We know that 70% of four-limb lamenesses are either localized to the foot or they're related to the foot if it occurs at the limb above. It allows the horse to perform at its highest level possible. And as far as both veterinary and farriery, it's the best possible deterrent we have to prevent lameness in equine veterinary medicine, I promise you. Okay? But remember, there's no free lunch. Okay? Every time farriery is performed on a horse's foot, the anatomical relationship of the structures that we just talked about within the foot are going to change. Furthermore, as you saw in the biomechanics, biomechanical forces exerted on the foot, and these are, or the digit, are also going to be affected. This is one of the farriers that works with me in Wellington. He's an Argentine farrier, but what I want you farriers to look at is that I beat up on him all the time. Look at his posture, okay? Protect your backs. Okay. If you have the horse in the center, whether it's a horse that is just for pleasure riding or it's an upper level competition horse, it has a whole village that's working on it. And you have the owner, the trainer. Now, these days, you have a masseuse, you have a nutritionist, you have a chiropractor, whatever. But I think the two biggest parts of keeping this horse sound, remember, he can go to a show with some skin bumps on or a little bit of a snotty nose, whatever, but he's not going to go to the show with his lame. Okay, he's not going to perform. And again, that's Fabio again. And I want you to tell me why you see the doctor's shirt soaked and his fairly dry. Wonderful, wonderful guy. Okay, that is the team. And we need some way or another to get you guys together a little bit better than we have now. This is wonderful. And there are so many times that you have a vet farrier meeting, you'll get vets, or you'll get farriers, but it's very hard to get them together, And I think in a lot of respects, you guys do a wonderful job. That's a paper Dr. Moyer, Dr. Harry Werner, and myself, plus a farrier, Jeff Ridley, we published that paper in Equine Veterinary Education in 2018. But so many times what you see is this animosity between the two professions, coming together. And you might be cordial face to face, but as soon as you leave, somebody did this wrong or somebody did that wrong and not happy. But when you think about it, who does it affect? Sure, it affects the two people involved, but it affects the patient, it affects the horse. Okay? Wouldn't it be better to have something that looked like this, where everybody's working together, okay? And you know, the veterinarian on the anatomical side, the farrier on the mechanical side, but there in the end you have a happy patient. It's all about the two professions working together. Okay, this just shows you a little further. We kind of leave the epidermis, in other words, the hoof capsule, those epidermal structures to the farrier. We leave the inner structures of the horse's foot, the dermis, and you know the circulation and all the sensitive structures to the veterinarian. But you got to remember these structures, outer and inwards, inside the capsule. These are interactive. Okay, so they complement each other. So you need the interactive profession. In other words, one structure affects the other. So you need both professions working on the horse's foot. This is something that's always fascinated me, probably kept me going for the last 50 years. When you think about it, the horse's foot is really unique because it's a group of biological structures that follow the laws of physics or biomechanics. And if we look at this again, a beautiful slide by Dr. Chris Pollock, I call it a mechanical marvel. These are all the structures of the hoof capsule that you see all the way around here, okay? And then we go ahead and we put look at the distal interphalangeal joint. There is your biomechanical focus. So where else are you going to find a structure like this, the group of structures that follow the laws of physics? And when you think about it, think about a 1,200-pound horse going over a 4-foot fence, landing on the other side of the fence on fairly firm ground, and the foot landing on structures that are 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches, and the foot doesn't explode. Pretty amazing when you think about it. I think sometimes you guys don't realize, what you do, on a daily basis. To me, a normal foot, it's hard to define, as I feel the foot is an individual anatomical entity for each given horse. Okay? Actually, each given foot. So I'd rather think about using the term a good foot, a healthy foot, or something like a functional foot, rather than you're reading all the textbooks and all the publications. This is a normal foot. I don't think we really know what a normal foot is. I think it's always good to watch a horse walk. And whether before your exam, especially before you do farriery, obviously because there's a lot you can gain. Number two, you can protect yourself by walking the horse before you do. But this horse, you can see this horse has a marked heel first landing. You see him land on his heels, and you have that toe flip. So you look at this and say, oh, what's going on? Well, obviously you can see that the heels have been allowed to migrate forward or dorsally, okay? And the horse has a size too small shoe on. So when he lands on his heels, but he lands far forward to where he should be. The toe comes down, okay? And then he breaks over. You trim the heels and you put a size bigger shoe on him, he comes and he lands flat. So you take one of those motions out of the horse landing. And a lot of times it's just enough for when horses are chronic shoe pullers. And let's go the other direction. Here's a horse that is landing toe first. Okay? This is abnormal, if you want to use that word. He either has some kind of a problem in the structures above, one of the tendons, one of the soft tissue structures, or he's got some pain in the palmar section of his foot where he's guarding his foot by landing toe first. Asymmetrical landing. Look at this horse here. First of all, you got a very narrow chest, and then don't look at his feet. Look at his knees, and you'll see that his knees are not straight. His knees, his forelimbs are rotated, so he's breaking over toward the outside. Okay, and when he breaks over toward the outside, now he's coming in to accept weight on an angle. So he's going to contact on the lateral side, and then he's going to load on the medial side. Okay. You can address some of this, you can't change it because his conformation, his forelimbs are dictating the load on the bottom of the horse's foot, like all horses, okay? Don't be in a lot of people will see this and say, oh, I'm going to get him landing flat. Ooh, that horse doesn't want to land flat because his conformation isn't allowing him to land flat. So Let's build a model of what we consider to be a good foot. And again, Dr. Andy Parks' beautiful drawings. If you look at the DP view here on the end, we like to have weight going through the middle of the digit if we can. We like to have a line going across the coronary band that is going to be parallel to a point on the ground. If we look at the lateral view, first of all, you know, again, if you read the textbooks, you'd like to have the angle of the dorsal hoof wall to be, basically pretty much the same as the heel area, the angle of the heel. That's not going to happen usually in this day and age, very rarely. If you draw a line down through MC3 of the cannon bone, you'd like that vertical line to end at the heel. In other words, the heel at the bearing border of the solar surface of the distal phalanx. You like to have the solar surface of the pastern and the hoof capsule be parallel or straight with the digit, okay? And then if you go ahead and draw a line across the solar surface of the foot, that creates a triangle. And every time you guys trim that horse's foot, you are affecting that triangle there. Looking at the foot on the right here, the solar surface, a line through the middle of the horse's foot, okay? And if you look at the proportions on either side, if you trim the heels to the highest, widest part of the foot or the base of the heels or whatever you want to call it, you're going to see that you're going to basically create approximate proportions on either side. And not equal portions, but approximate portions. So when, in the end, when you're finished, just like we did a couple horses today, when you're finished, your foot is basically as wide as it is long. And the only thing you're going to have difference there is you have some flares which can easily be addressed. Okay. Looking at it from the side, I'll show you how we look at, there's the middle of the horse's foot. The red is the hoof pastern axis, and again you have you can have the toe angle. It's pretty similar to the heel angle. Again, something we don't see every day. But if you look at the middle of the foot, you look at the proportions on either side. That's what we really like to see is a biomechanically efficient foot. And you don't have to pick the foot up. And if you go ahead and you look at those two lines there, you can take your thumb. Anybody in here can do it. You can put your thumb on the dorsal border of the middle phalanx and the palmar border, okay, and just come down to the coronary band, right in the middle of that opening there between those two lines, draw a line vertically, and that's going to correspond pretty much to the widest part of the horse's foot. The foot on the right, you love to take pictures of feet that look like this. You can see the foot in the middle of the foot. You can see the foot trimmed to the base of the frog, and you can see the proportions on either side of it. And I'll show you in just a minute is that, okay, if you look at the widest part of the horse's foot, you basically know where the center of rotation is. And I'll show you that in a second. But my biggest goal, and I'll just start here with it, is that we can't always trim the horse's foot to the base of the frog. But what we can do is we can trim the heels such that they're on the same plane as the frog. So in that way, we're making the heels load sharing. That's what I strive for. Okay. When I pick up a horse's foot, I look at the frog. If you don't have a healthy, robust frog, you don't have a good, healthy frog. You don't have a healthy foot. If you have a healthy foot, you're going to have a healthy frog. And Tracy Turner, years ago, he published this in one of his papers, that the width of the frog, and I've kind of lived by it, should be at least 70% of its length. And you don't have to have a rule where you can pick up a horse's foot and you can eyeball this thing and you can say, ooh, this frog needs some help or this foot needs some help. But you can look at that and you can say, well, this is a pretty healthy frog. And the other part of it I look at there, any foot I pick up, I visualize or sometimes I draw a line across the widest part of the horse's foot because that's my starting point. And remember, for all these feet to be healthy, you need to have a healthy frog in there. Okay. Good foot conformation. I'm just looking at a couple different angles. Here's a set of foot radiographs from Dr. Ken Allen. There you see the center of rotation. You see a nice straight hoof pastern axis. You have a little bit of depth to the heels there, and you have good proportions on either side of the center of rotation. And when you think about those proportions, think about those moments we talked about before. This is where they're really going to come into play for you. The DP view, when you read a DP view radiograph, you always want to have the digit straight, okay? Because if the digit is not straight, you're changing all everything you're trying to read down here on the bottom. If you look at these two foramen where your vessels go into the bone here, you can take a line to the ground, or you can put a wire in your block, and you like to have those two foramen parallel to the ground. Okay. So, basic farriery is trimming. Trimming is farriery. Farriery is trimming. It all begins with the shoe. And when you apply a shoe to a horse's foot, you're protecting what you have trimmed and the ability to complement your trim if you don't have the structures, or you don't want the structures that, or if you want to improve those structures. And as far as the shoes go, it's important to have the size. We see so many shoes that are too small. The type of the shoe for what the horse is going to do, and where you place that shoe is so important. And you can change that foot so much by changing the where you place that shoe on the horse's foot. Breakover modifications and heel elevation, if necessary, those are basically what we can do with a shoe. A basic shoe that you take out of your shoe, or a fancy shoe, but those are the basics that we're going to be doing with the farriery. So here's just a couple things that your mother may have told you never to discuss in mixed or play companies sometimes. And one is politics, probably in all our countries. Another one is religion. Another one is sex. Okay? And how about hoof balance? You want to get a group of farriers out or vets going, just start talking about hoof balance, okay? Because, you know, what does it really mean if I tell you I balanced the horse's foot? Or a farrier comes back and tells me, Doc, I balanced that horse's feet, looks good. Well, what does it really mean? So, you know, what is it? Or how do we define it? We really can't define it because there's no definition for it. It works for the person who's using that term at that given time, or put it in a farrier journal or something like that. To me, it's a concept. So a couple of years ago, a good farrier in Wellington, he called me, he said, Doc, he said, listen, I finally figured out balance. I said, well, Jim, tell me. Oh no, he said, I'll send it up to you, I'll text it up to you in a minute. You know? I said, no, tell me what, no, you gotta look at this. So anyway, I look at my phone, he sends it up, and that's his idea of hoof balance. He's a great farrier in Wellington. So I would like to think about guidelines for trimming that we can apply to all feet. That is going to give us consistent results, or going to give us consistent guidelines that we can use for every foot. And the hoof pastern axis is one, and I'm going to go through these. The center of rotation is another. The ground surface of the hoof capsule extending to the base of the frog, or trim to include the frog if you don't have those structures where you can get it back, you know, where you want. Then, you know, if you can't get to the base of the frog, we can always extend our shoe a little bit to compensate for the heel area we don't have. Okay? Well, you got another person there. Okay. So if we think about the hoof pastern axis, we have a straight hoof pastern axis. We can divide it into broken back, and we can look at broken forward. Okay? So for the most efficient way to accept weight, we want to have the weight going through the middle of the joints. If we don't have the weight going through the middle of the joints, we're not using the joint spacer, we're not using the joint spaces properly, and that obviously leads to disease. So when you have good digital alignment there, then we generally have a straight hoof pastern axis, right? So you say, well, okay, what's the big deal? If we have good digital alignment, and then we have good straight or parallel hoof pastern axis, we're going to have a good relationship of the solar surface of the bone with the ground. Okay, this is what the whole hoof pastern axis is about. And let's go the other way. Let's go with a broken back hoof pastern axis. Look at the shift in the joint here. Okay, you see how you've shifted your load bearing to the back part, or the palmar or plantar section of the horse's foot. And yep, that's where your load is, in that area there. Okay? So let's go the other direction, And let's go with a broken forward hoof pastern axis. You can see right away where the middle phalanx, it starts to ride up on the rim of the coffin bone joint there. Nothing's going to lead to osteoarthritis faster than that. But you're right, when you have that kind of conformation, you got the load of the toe. Then you start to see, you know, the fragile toe, you start to see cracks in there, you start to see concavities and whatever. Okay. And there's the horse with a good straight hoof pastern axis. There is the middle of the horse's foot, and there is the proportions on either side. That's what we like to end up with when we can. Okay. There on the bottom there is an example of a horse with a broken back hoof pastern axis. And there's a lot we can do with this horse. Any one of you guys can look at where the weight here has shifted toward the palmar section of the horse's foot. You see where that coronary band there, that bulb there is starting to get thickened from the stress. Okay, just trim those heels appropriately. Address the toe, put a size bigger shoe on, and just before your eyes you go like that. Okay? Okay? The same way over here. This is a little bit more complicated with the broken forward hoof pastern axis. But if you learn to identify there you can see the illustration up above here. Now let's take it to the horse. You'll see that you have a disparity in the hoof wall growth, more hoof wall growth back at the heels. You see how there's less hoof wall growth at the toe. Look at the concavity here, and you start to see these packed growth rings here. Whether you see them at the heel or the toe or whatever, these packed growth rings, this has nothing to do with nutrition. This is a sign of stress when you see these packed growth rings. Okay, I finally got this pointer on me. We look at the hoof pastern axis radiographically. There is one that in the front, the first one there, it's got a straight or a parallel hoof pastern axis. The second one is broken back. And what I really want you to look at the joint space. Because when you address these, in other words, by observing these and understanding you're there, when you address the horse's foot with these different hoof capsule distortions, you're paying a compliment to the veterinarians. In other words, you're doing some of their job for them. Because anybody in here, we can put any kind of injection you want in, especially these horses with the low heels. It's only going to be transient until you go ahead and affect the alignment of that joint, or oops, I did it again. Or you take some of that, you fix the alignment of that joint, take some of that stress off the joint. Okay. I know you still see a lot of these angle gauge of the horse's foot being used. But you have to remember that angle gauge only gives you the angle of the horse's foot. It says nothing of the angle of the horse's foot in relation to the digit. So if you think about the hoof angle being correct for each given horse, if the hoof pastern axis is parallel or straight, you know, I think it's a much better kind of a guideline to use. Okay, I don't think I went the other way. Good, okay. And again, when you think about the center of rotation, this is where it all begins. And when you think about extending force, you think about flexing force, think about trimming the toe, think about trimming the heel, how you're affecting these horses, okay? And the center of rotation has a really good correlation with the widest part of the horse's foot, as we said before. So I picked on Dr. Ken Allen again, which I do a lot. He's about 10 miles from me. He probably hates me, but anyway, I do it anyway. And we took 12 horses. This is just an example, this radiograph on the left with the center of rotation. So that's one of Andy Parks' radiographs. Well, we took 12 horses with different conformation. And you can see I measured the widest part of the horse's foot on all 12 of these. And this is one from the actual study. And there I put a thumbtack right at the sole wall junction. Okay? In all 12 cases, or all 12 horses, we found that the widest part of the foot, measured widest part of the foot, you can measure the widest part of the foot or the widest part to the white line like Grant Moon likes to do. Either one is the same thing. And we found that the widest part of the foot was between 5 and 9 millimeters dorsal to the center of rotation. Okay? So when you pick up the bottom of the horse's foot, okay, you can go ahead, there's the widest part of the foot, trim your foot, and you know when you're finished, the center of rotation is just a little bit behind there, okay? So it gives you a guideline to take your radiographs or just, you know, eyeball where you're or draw a line or whatever. It gives you your starting point for your trim. It's a wonderful, wonderful guideline, probably the first one I go to. But I want you to think about proportions. And if you look at the trim foot, we can also do with the shoe. And again, this is not a fancy shoe. It's got a little breakover forks in it, but there is your proportions, the widest part of the horse's foot. Look at your proportions where the heels are trimmed to, where your shoe goes to, and then you know where the center of rotation is. So there you have, you've trimmed and you've shod the hoof capsule. Now you've put some breakover in, so you've actually moved your breakover back, and you see where I haven't put that line all the way to the end, or to the toe. Again, think about proportions. Think about that widest part of the horse's foot, and a long proportion in the front, and a very small ground surface behind. Carlos Montaga, he's a farrier in Italy. He's come to a couple of my lectures, and he's just a wonderful guy. He sent me pictures every once in a while. This horse was shod 3 weeks ago, came into his shop, and I want you to look at the middle of the horse's foot, or center of rotation there. Look at the proportions there. Then look at the proportions on the right, where he's trimmed the horse's foot. Look at the proportions he changed. Same place, same line there. Okay? Now he put one of those, I forget what you call these, but look at the amount of breakover underneath there. So he has the proportions on the horse's foot. Now he's put a mechanical shoe on there that has just changed the breakover a lot more for that particular horse for whatever reason. But it just gives you an example of using the center of rotation. Okay. So for the guidelines that we've talked about so far is look at the widest part of the foot. Now this is just a foot I picked out of the box. And first of all, what am I going to look at? The frog. Look at the frog, and you see that the frog is reseated down below the hoof wall. Horses have a self-cleaning mechanism in the bottom of the horse's feet, and you know, when you have a good frog that's level with the hoof wall, you just have the sulci there. So when the horse goes and he loads, the frog will spread outwards, so anything that's in the sulci is going to be pushed out. So when I pick up a horse's foot and I see the frog or that frog section stuffed with manure, and I have to take a hammer and chisel to get it out of there, okay? That's pure pressure on there because the frog is not working, it's not healthy, and it's sitting down below the wall there. Now anything that's picked up there puts pressure on it. You can take this frog, you can debride the diseased area off it, move your heels back to the point where it's on the same plane, and look at that frog 2 weeks later. It's a different model, I promise you. So to get off, I just get off on frogs. But look at the proportions here, the second proportion from the widest part of the foot to the heel. There's the base of the frog. Now go ahead and move your heels back to the base of the frog. Now reduce your toe to approximate proportion here, and you've got a biomechanically efficient foot. And all you've done is use your rasp and your nipper sometimes. And I want to stress from the beginning that some of these horses, anybody here can put hoof testers on them. And if you put hoof testers on these horses, and now, we're not looking for pain, but you also use your hoof testers to see how good those structures are. So if you put hoof testers on there and that sole gives, it generally means that you have less than 15 millimeters of sole there. Okay? So there, you can trim the toe for depth, and you can trim the toe for length. Trimming the toe for depth is horizontally. Trimming the toe for length is taking it in a vertical direction, either from the bottom or from the front. You can accomplish the same exact thing there. Okay? So there's a big difference there. Radiology is a wonderful thing, and I call it forging an alliance between vets and farriers, because I don't know of any vet that I know of, if a farrier calls or a farrier client calls and say, listen, I'm having trouble with this horse, or I have a few questions, would you radiograph this thing and let's chat out, or give me radiographs for it? They'll all do it. This is one of oops. Why am I going the other way? There we go. This is one of Andy Parks' radiographs showing that there is the center of rotation, there's the widest part of the foot, and there's your digital brake over there, and there's your proportions. A nice lateral radiograph, if we look at it, I've been looking at this area a lot, and I think, in fact, Roy and I talked about it this morning. This is hoof wall, this is dermis. The ratio there should be 1.5 to 1 in a good foot. And if you see this ratio, it starts to turn, or it starts to divulge down here at the bottom, it's a very useful guideline that we probably don't use enough. There's your digital alignment. There is your hoof pastern axis. There is your sole depth or thickness, whatever you want to call it. There's the angle of the solar border of the distal phalanx. There's your proportion. There's your center. Let's add 1, 2. That's about eight guidelines. I don't like the word measurements. Good guidelines you can take off that radiograph. And it's just knowing what to look for and how useful some of these parameters are to you. Okay, this is just an example. Look at your center of rotation here. Okay, drop your line down. You know that the widest part of the foot is there. Okay, look at how the bulbs of the heels are starting to prolapse or starting to bulge out the back here. See that knob-shaped appearance? Take that shoe off, trim your heels, reduce the toe a little bit if necessary, put a size larger shoe on it, put a little brake over in there. Look what you've done there with just a size larger shoe in your tools. This is a horse with a mild club foot, and it's just showing you that, okay, look at this foot, and let's put our guidelines in. There's the center of rotation, okay? There's the proportions on either side, so it's going to give you an idea which way you want to go. You can look at your sole depth, how much sole depth you have there, how much you want to reduce that. But when you look at these things, always look at the joint first, because you also have a bit of a broken forward hoof pastern axis here. So it means you got a little shortening of the deep digital flexor tendon, muscle tendon unit. So that's something else that you may want to put into your equation. And it looks like you have a little bit of heel elevation on there as well, but it seems like nothing's been trimmed there. Okay, here's another one. It's a pretty good one. I'm not giving you the after ones here. Some of them I don't have, but here's the radiograph that's presented here on the left. Okay, look at the broken back hoof pastern axis. Okay, look at what you have here. Okay, look at the center of rotation. Look at the proportions on either side, and just, you know, if somebody doesn't tell you, this horse has, you know, a separation underneath the distal phalanx here. That has to be dealt with. Either, you know, rather deal with it now, find out where it is, where it's coming from, rather than later. So there's so many different things that you can see there. But when you start to see this bulge here, this sort of knob-shaped appearance, you have started to lose your heels because they're migrating forward. You're losing that angle. Also there, you see we also have a sheared heel because you have two images there on the side. Okay, just one more. Okay, there's your broken back hoof pastern axis. Okay, there's your center of rotation. Okay, there. Look at the joint. Look at the position of the joint. That is looking for disease. Let's put it that way. Okay, because that joint is under stress, and this is the biggest or the worst part of these horses that have this these low heels. Okay, here's your proportions. So these guidelines kind of give you a direction where you want to go. The final thing we're going to look at is the ground surface of the foot, and this is the heels extending to the heels of the hoof capsule extending to the base of the prod. If we look at this illustration here, you'll see that two-thirds of the hoof capsule is osseous, and then 1/3 is soft tissue. Okay, one to accept weight, one to dissipate energy and absorb concussion. Both of them working together. If you allow those heels to migrate forward, this is not going to stay still. It's going to go somewhere else. It's going to go out toward the back. If we look at the next one here, let's look at it from above. Okay, there's your distal. I'm just hitting the button like I always did. I don't know why I keep doing that. But anyway, if we look at the coffin bone or distal phalanx from above, there's your articular surface. And you see how much of the hoof capsule this is occupying. Now, look at the palmar plantar section of the horse's foot, okay, with your soft tissue in there. Now, if you allow those heels to migrate forward, okay, what happens there is the soft tissue starts to go the other direction, and you start to, the closer you get to the bone, you're bypassing the shock absorbing mechanism, and you're putting the force of the load right on the bone, the mallee right up onto the thing, as we said before. Okay? So if we have our bony structures and if we have the soft tissue structures, we want to have them contained within the hoof capsule. So both of them are working together. Okay? Okay. Once the heels start to move forward, the soft tissue starts to go the other way. You know, and you start to put more load on the structures in the front there. And there's the middle. So there's an illustration that gives you a model as well about all the things we were talking about. Guys, short shoes. Okay. A horse will pull a short shoe far faster than he will a long shoe, almost guaranteed. Because remember, think back to that video. With that foot, with that shoe, and or the foot trim, the horse lands much forward, okay? Lands to the heels, his foot's on an arc, so he lands, he's got to come down flat and then break over. 3 motions instead of 2 motions. That 1 motion there can be just enough for the hind foot to come up and pull the front shoe off, okay? And look at the coronary band. This is the high heel, low heel. You probably see from the thing. Look at the coronary band. And look at how you get back toward the heel. Look at that knob and look at that bulge there, because that whole thing is sitting outside of the hoof capsule. Okay? And the shoe there. Take the shoe off, you know, rub the heels, and put a size or 2 bigger shoe back on, and it's got a completely different conformation. Look at the coronary band. It's going toward the sky. The palmar foot, you know, the dorsal section of the foot, it's pretty simple. We can trim the foot according to the sole depth. You know, we can reduce or the toe according to length or the mass underneath. But trimming the soft tissue structures, these are always changing. You know, they're always different, and it's often controversial about how to trim them. There's many theories and there's many thoughts. But now go back to the anatomy, which we talked about, and the biomechanical principles. These have some credibility. These are pretty factual. You know, we know a lot about this. So we should be able to take some of the controversy out of there. And if I had my way, and I could change something in the farrier language and the horse industry, it would be, don't lower the heels. It should be removed. Because you don't lower the heels, because heels do not grow tall, they grow forward. Think about the hoof capsule as being a cone. It couldn't be a cone if it were locked in and grew up like that. It has to go forward. Okay? So they grow forward, not tall. So trimming the heel to the base of the frog or to the same plane as the frog increases the ground surface on the bottom of the horse's foot. And if you have a horse that the heels have migrated dorsally, take a radiograph before. Okay. Then move the heels back, take a radiograph afterwards, and the hoof pastern axis is going to have changed. Why? Because just moving the heels back, creating more ground surface, is going to, remember those moments, it's going to create a little bit of relaxation of the flexor tendon, and what's going to happen? Hoof pastern axis is going to go up a bit. So it improves the foot conformation. Here's the foot. If you look at those, see all those striations there, those are horn tubules, okay? And just put our line in like we have. There we go. Okay, look at the proportions on either side. Now this foot is a little bit oblique, I admit that. Okay, look at the coronary band. You start to go towards the coronary band, you see where it's out of the hoof capsule. It's not contained within the hoof capsule. You see the stress it's taken? You see how you got that little, I call it a little speed bump. And why is that speed bump occurring? Because look at where the foot lands. Look at where the heel lands. And it's always going to correspond to that area that's being pushed up. Take that shoe off, rub the heels, okay, put a size bigger shoe on, and over a week to 10 days, that'll just settle right down. Some of these you have to prove to yourself. Heels do not grow tall, they grow forward. Here we go. This is the same foot. This is back in the days where we used a lot of Play-Doh for radiographs. But there you can see I moved the heels back to the same plane as the frog. I reduced the toe length, not depth, and there's the middle of the foot. So I've created a foot there. Now if I put a shoe on that, you wouldn't believe that that coronary band would just change so much in just a little bit of time. You can look at these feet. There's the widest part of the horse's foot. Okay, look at where the yellow arrow is. You notice the bulbs coming around and forming that knob-shaped appearance. You see how you're losing the angle of this foot completely. There is the end of the heel. Now, the end of the heel is expanding in a place where it's not meant to be. Look at that short ground surface between there and the middle of the horse's foot. You see how fragile it's got? And you see how this is starting to bulge in there because it's expanding where it shouldn't be so far forward. And so you can work a lot of these distortions out. And if you don't believe that's the same foot, there's the horse's radiograph. Okay. As I said before, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Again, look at the foot on the left there. Okay, there's the widest part of the horse's foot. There's the end of the heel. You see where it's going right to the speed bump? Look at the foot here on the right. There is the widest part of the horse's foot. Remember, the center of rotation is static. Okay, the foot's going to grow forward. It's going to grow from from the time the horse is shod until it's reshod the next time. Look at the frog becoming narrower, and you see where it's recessed down between the hoof wall. There's the end of your heels there. When I trim the palmar foot, or what I like to see happen, I like to make this is a nice foot, don't get me wrong, heels load sharing. And what I want is I want to trim the horse's foot to the widest part of the foot if I can. But more importantly to me, I want to have the heels trimmed to such that the heels of the hoof capsule and the frog are on the same plane. And I'm the happiest person going. And a lot of times if I have a nice healthy frog, I'll just trim the heels until my rasp goes ahead and starts to nick that going across. And when I look, I have basically moved the heels back to the base of the frog. That's a new brand rasp. And the other majority of the things is when you trim these heels, you can look at a lot of things happen is when you get the frog on the same plane, when it moves back to the base of the heel, the angle of the sole is basically going to become solid there. It's not going to be shedding anymore. It's a really good guideline for you taking the heels back. Here's a horse we can look at this. As you follow the coronary band back. Okay, look at the packed growth rates here. Look at the stress. Look at how the coronary band becomes wide. It's sitting outside of the hoof capsule. This is the same foot where we went ahead and we put a little bit of heel elevation because I wanted to improve this. He had pretty fair heel structures, and we put a little impression material underneath there because we wanted to unload the other side. But look at the difference in the foot. And again, all you're using is a shoe, a leather pad, in this particular case, and your farrier tools. Okay. This is again. Some of these are pretty nice horses. And these horses are performing this way. Look at this horse on the left there. This is the show hunter, and you can see again. Look at the coronary band. Look at it as it goes back toward the heel. See that rounded knob-shaped affair? You see how thickened it gets. It's almost horizontal there. But look at where the heels have migrated forward there. And underneath there, the frog is halfway to the coronary band inside. This is the same foot. Take the shoe off, trim the foot, let the foot relax a little bit, do the hind feet, then come back to this. Look at the difference in this with trimming the heels and putting a side bigger shoe on. Okay. Biomechanically, which foot would you rather have underneath your horse? Here's another horse with the heels migrating dorsally. You wonder why the horse had a quarter crack on the other side, had the shoes glued on, which I'm not a big fan of. Trim the foot, okay? Put a size bigger shoe on, and look at the difference that you have. This is a horse from recently. I just kind of, this had a lot going for it, so I put it in here. This is actually a very nice horse. It was on his way to Europe. It's a dressage horse. Believe it or not, this is the way the horse was shot. So let's put some of our stuff in there. Okay, look at the widest part of the horse's foot here. Okay, look at the proportions on the shoe, and in this particular case, you can see, look at the shoe, everything's sitting out behind the horse. Okay, and this was, you know, in their area where this horse was. I never criticize, I never have, never will criticize a farrier, but this is one of the guys, go-to guys in their area, but the horse wasn't doing well. This arrow here, I just wanted to reiterate again, is look at the toe here. He had a lot of toe on. But see how smooth that is, you know? Now go back toward the heel and look at these growth frames. You see how they're packed together? That's always a sign of stress. It has nothing to do with any kind of nutrition. Okay? And you see he's got a little bit of a broken back hoof pastern axis. So anyway, we went ahead and shot the horse. And this is what he looked like when we got done. Okay? I put a little bit of heel elevation on him, and I put a size and a half bigger shoe on him. And what we do sometimes with this, if two sizes shoes are too big, we'll take a hind shoe and we'll forge it into a front shoe. So it gives us another half size. And that's, I think, what we did with this horse. But this is how the horse came in, as you see here. This is how he went out, you know, an hour and a half later. And all we used was, you know, just routine shoes and our farrier tools. Okay, let's look at this just a little bit. I don't know what to do about it any more than you guys do, but it certainly is a problem. It's a radiographic symptom. In our country, it's become a diagnosis. What's wrong with that horse? He's got negative palmar angle. It's not even negative, it's distal when you think about how it goes down, okay? It's indicative of dorsiflexion of the distal interphalangeal joint. Look at the position it puts the joint in. The common clinical features of that is it's got a broken hoof pastern axis, it's got long toe with low heels, it's got the dorsal sole depth. A lot of times you can put your thumb at the point of the frog there and you can sort of get lost because, you know, it's almost like a canyon down there, and you got this big increased sole concavity. So if you go ahead and you put your center of rotation in here, in another way, look at this angle of the bone here, put your center of rotation in here, what do you basically have? You have a seesaw, okay? You put a big heavy person on one side and you put a light person on the other side. How does the seesaw go? It goes to the lighter person. So what it shows is, if you think of the seesaw, this area is overloaded, this area is underloaded. So what we need to do is, again, straighten out those moments. It's not just as simple as just losing the back part of the horse's foot. Genetics play a big role, especially thoroughbreds. On some breeding farms, I've seen weanlings that are 6 months old and the back of the foot's destroyed. And you look at the mother, you know, passed it on down to the child. Lack of soft tissue development in the young horse, especially, you know, horses that are kept in, or horses like thoroughbred horses going to sale. We shoe these horses too early. Why do we have to wait, or why do we have to put shoes on them so they look pretty to go to sales? Why not have a pretty barefoot horse go to sale? The surface on which the horse works, the amount of work the horse does, the weight of the horse. Farriery plays a big role in this, so the whole pathogenesis is really multifactorial there. A lot of these young thoroughbred horses, they're sold into sales as yearlings or long yearlings. What happens is they're broke, and they go to the racetrack. And they stand in the stall 23 hours a day, and then they go to the racetrack and they're overworked for 45 minutes or something. Okay? Those feet need to be out walking around and developing, and this is not happening, especially in thoroughbred horses, and in a lot of horses, especially if you don't have the areas to get them out. Okay? I put this slide up earlier on. What you have to think about, it means that you've lost the soft tissue structures in the palmar section of the horse's foot. Why? You know, sometimes it's for this reason, sometimes it's farrier related, sometimes it's for other things. This is what allows the palmar processes of the distal phalanx to descend. Because you don't see this in feet with good structures. So one of the big things we got to think about is how can we preserve this, how can we improve this before we get to this particular state. And here's the problem, in my mind, is the limited heel growth. It's very hard to get these horses to grow heel. And look at this horse here. Okay, took his shoes off, the frog is prolapsed down below the hoof wall. He's standing on his frog. Okay, so how do I get that hoof wall to grow toward the ground? Here's a really nice show horse with a shoe that is a size too small. There is the end of the heel. Right there. There's the end of the heel way up there. Okay, all this stuff is just prolapsing through the heels there. The soft tissue structures here, this is the limiting factor. And Andy made these slides for me, and I think it depicts it a little bit as we start to lose the palmar section of the horse's foot, the frog and the digital cushion and those soft tissue structures, they start to decrease, and they start to prolapse toward the ground. And when they prolapse toward the ground, as you by the time I finish here, I'll have this sorted out. Okay, you can see here where the frog has prolapsed down below the ground. So in order for heels, think about the front part of the horse's foot. You need lattice work for the horse to grow down. You have the lamellae and everything in the front part of the horse's foot. You need these structures, especially the lateral cartilages and the digital cushion, to create this lattice work and this framework for these heels to grow from. Okay, that's what happens when the heels prolapse down below there. They continue to get beat up. You lose the mass of those structures. Now we don't have anything where we can go ahead and grow hoof wall from. I hope that makes sense to you. Okay, so rather than one size fits all, I'd like to, again, I'd like to use farrier principles, and we rehabilitate a lot of these horses barefoot, okay? Because now, the foot's going to be trimmed by friction, it's not rubbing against the shoe, and we can get the frog on the same plane quickly. Reduce the toe length and leverage, not depth, length, okay? Increase ground surface, okay? We can do that with the trim or the shoe. Redistribute weight bearing, to a better part of the horse's foot, not to the front part of the horse's foot or dorsal part. And then if you do this, you always have to deal with breakover. Again, remember the moments. Here's a horse. This is a barefoot horse, and again, he came in. Well, actually, he was showing until the point where he got lame. You can see here that the frog, you can't see it from here, but it's prolapsed down below the shoe. Okay, so when you stand on the ground, he's standing on the frog, and you can put a coin underneath there. And also note where the heels of the hoof cap, they rolled underneath the horse. This is what I call underrun heels. And once these heels bend and fold in like that, they have no more ability to accept weight. So now you're putting all the load on the frog. So I took these flaps off of here, sideways, which I don't often do with rasp. I reduced the toe length across there, okay? And we trim this horse every 2 weeks. He should be here somewhere. There he goes, okay? This is what it looked like 5 weeks later. I can't do this with the shoe or a device or whatever, as I can do it with some horses barefoot. Now, granted, this horse has some structures left, so you always have to take that into consideration, what you have to work with. But you can see it's the same. And you can see over time where you can see where those heels, see those bars curving there. It looks like a head of a bird, okay? Because that frog, is not acting as a suspension joint. Okay? This is a wooden shoe. Look at the horse there on the left. It's a radiograph. Put him in a wooden shoe. Next to being barefoot, a wooden shoe will grow mass in these horses faster than anything I know. And this is 3 weeks later, and look at the amount of sole we have here, but look at the amount of sole we have in the back there, okay? That is, to my mind, when we start like that, look at the structures there, and we end up like that, 3 weeks later, it's pretty incredible. So it's just another, I'm just throwing some thoughts out to you, because I really don't know what to do with these guys. We can create an interface with this, and this way you can actually add a little heel elevation. So this is just a shoe with some breakover in it, and oops. This is frustrating. Okay, you see where we put this is a 2 or 3 degree wedge pad. I don't usually use over 2 degrees, so you can see where I made a little bit of more length there with the pad there. I built an interface there between the pad and the hoof wall, so when the horse loads into this, he's not abrading the hoof wall, or he's not wearing the hoof wall against the shoe or the pad there. And this could work very nicely as well. Okay. I like spider plates again. It'll protect the area back here very, very nicely. Okay, and at the same time, these are made by Deplano in Italy. They're wonderful. These are just as hard, just as firm as steel is, but you can work them very, very nicely. And you give some nice protection. You make the heels load sharing there. You got the rim around here, but these arms are going to redirect or redistribute some of your load away from the heels back toward the hoof wall. And if you really want to get fancy, you can go ahead and you can fill the bottom of the foot with a softer impression material like number 40 works very nicely. Fill the whole foot. You can actually build the impression material up a little bit more at the heels to give you a little heel elevation. Now set your shoe down into the impression material and nail the shoe on, put a couple nails in there, and just wait till it firms up so it doesn't squeeze out when you put the foot on the ground. Okay? These are carbon fiber ones. These are plastic ones here that are made by Castle Pad. This one is wrong side around. The other side, if you turn it away from the advertisement there, they're a little rougher on the inside, but they're not shiny. They become very rough and real quick. They don't slip as well. Okay. Now remember, on the third day, Derek Popart created these 3D pads. Okay, they create a nice interface as well. I'm very proud of this guy because I've trained him, and I didn't train the entrepreneur part. I trained the farrier part. But what he has done, he has sort of put everything in one little package to put these on. And when I put these on, again, what it does, it makes the back of the foot load sharing. He's got a little recess, underneath that frog plate where I'll put a little impression material in there. See, these aren't mine, but you see where they have impression material all the way across the foot. I'll just put them in over top of the frog, in the frog sulci. So I have the shoe and the pad sitting firmly on the horse's foot. The other part of this, you can see here that the frog plate comes up even right here with the end of the shoe, and so it's creating a flat level surface in the back part of the horse's foot, which is putting level forces on your structures above. So very helpful. In every horse, no. That's one being put on. That's what the pad looks like. You've probably seen these before. And they also come in a full pad as well, where you can put impression material underneath the whole foot, like I showed you before. Don't forget breakover. You do all this work to the heels, and you created this great thing, but remember the moment, you want to reduce the arm or the leverage in the front. And there's so many ways of doing it. These are those Coleoni shoes from Italy. You can see that they have breakover all the way around. Horses love them. It's like Air Nikes. You saw this, no, this is another horse. But again, they're like we did today with Mark. We just ground the breakover in. Here is one that with a rocker toe. I don't use that as much because you have to take away some of the mass that I like in the front part of the horse's foot. But there's dozens of ways of doing it. But I just want to put that up. Don't forget the part about the breakover. The prognosis on these horses, okay, if primary heel collapse is caught early without secondary changes to the structures, you can reverse these things really, really nicely. If primary heel collapse with secondary changes, in other words, the structures are not adequate, it's a long-term management thing, as you can see there. If primary increase in the deep digital flexure length or a decrease in tension, long-term management. I don't know how you put tension back in there. And that's my beautiful daughter. Thank you, guys.